Good day everyone, so hope you're all doing really well. How do you take a lot of data about the meta in Genshin Impact and turn it into beautiful and yet simple to interpret graphs? Well, that is what today's video is going to be all about. But before we begin, I first have to thank I Win to Lose Gaming for giving us this data set and making the spreadsheet publicly available. This means we can also do a bit of analysis, and I urge you to go and watch his video first. The TLDR is that he compiled all of this and using some data sources, and he basically created a bunch of charts which he then interpreted in his video. I'll leave the interpretation to you to decide how useful you might think it is. For me, I do think that plotting Kokomi next to Furina and then trying to make an inference on the meta usage rate of Kokomi versus Furina, that Furina caused Kokomi to fall off, is I think it's not very scientific. For me, the best way to look at data like this is to properly create a massive full-blown correlation matrix so that we can properly encapsulate all the changes in these meta rates and see exactly what the interrelationships are, because it's not just about one character versus another character, but rather the interaction between all of the changes, and that's really where the juicy insight is going to be. So for that purpose, you'll see that the list that I Win to Lose Gaming compiled here has 83 characters. Now obviously some of these characters have such a low usage rate that it really is not going to be that feasible to include them, and obviously some of the numbers are very small. So for instance, like Chlorand and Sichuan aren't going to give us any meaningful insight. So I had to do a bit of filtering, and after my filtering's done, I had about 63 characters remaining. So I believe in my own judgment that this should be good enough for us to get some insights into the meta state, and from this I calculated a correlation matrix. Now I am a data scientist. I do lots of quantitative work at my work as an investment professional as well. So for me, this isn't the state-of-the-art way to analyze this data set. So let me just caveat that. The way I'm analyzing data is simply using Python and Excel, and all I'm doing is using basic functions that I'll also make available to everyone else. So yes, there is a couple of asterisks, if I can put it like that, or a bunch of asterisks that I have to put with this analysis. It's not perfect. There is some bias into it, but yet with the problems that there are and that we would typically solve using commercial methods, I think we can still get some good insight. So for example, you can see here is the Kokomi table, and I can see that her usage rate has an 82% correlation with Nilo's usage rate in the Spiral Abyss. Certain things that make sense like that are comes through in the data. So it's not like everything is just going to be bad. In any case, the way to interpret correlations is that anything between -1.7 and 0.17 are basically random noise, so you can ignore that, and everything else, which is basically color coded here, either in red or in blue, blue being positive correlation and red being negative, these tend to be a bit more significant. Obviously the coloring is affected by Excel's conditional formatting. I didn't put in any special rules or the like, but I just wanted you to see some of these strong correlations that might come out, and exactly how we could perhaps start thinking of some of these. Right, so with the correlations in usage rates being plotted out, we can create a dendrogram, and effectively what this does is it allows us to cluster the usage rates of characters. So for instance, the usage rates of Kazuha, Furina, Charlotte and Nouvellette are all clustered together. They all sort of follow the same perception. It would be inaccurate to say that when you use Furina you would use Charlotte or you'd use Nouvellette. That's not really the statement. The statement here is that the changes in the usage rates more typically cluster with these. You can see there's a bit of an outlier here with Beidou and Klee, where their usage rates really they don't really fit into any of the other categories, but we do see some positive ones. For instance, like here with Jean and Baiju. For instance, with the rise of Furina, you are obviously had Jean, and with Nouvellette you had Baiju, and with these two being released, Jean and Baiju obviously become quite significant, and they actually fall in a very similar cluster with Furina and Nouvellette. So certainly some of the sense checks that we'd expect just from playing the game and from the teams that like these characters are involved in makes the analysis seem a bit more plausible. We can see some interesting things like Al-Haytham and Cookie being in the same bunch, Kaching and Sinnoh and Fischl all grouping together. Once again, this is all algorithmically driven, and I've got the code that I'll obviously share with all of you, so you'll be able to go and obviously like confirm it for yourself. But it is quite powerful to see it. It's also interesting to see that Kokomi and Ayato have similar changes in usage rates, so they're very highly correlated in terms of their usage rates in the Abyss. Some of the other fun ones is that Xiangling and Bennett are like really tightly coupled, so Xiangling and Bennett tend to rise and fall together, so there's definitely that group. And there are a couple of others here as well. I'll definitely put up the pictures. You can see here that all of the Geo characters, funnily enough, group together, so when the Abyss really favors them, you can see they typically tend to all rise or fall together, which is really interesting. So these clusters are just like really powerful, but still this becomes very difficult to interpret. Oh, by the way, another one I need to say is Tainari and Yaemiko. Once again, we'd expect those two to be together. Xiao, Shan Yun, Gaming. I mean, come on, I think we can start seeing some of the metas and playstyles being reflected in the Dendrogram. It's so powerful. In any case, the one that I really like doing, in fact, is actually creating this tree-like diagram. The code to this is quite a bit more involved, so to anyone doing some numerical analysis, you can just use my code as a bit of a template, but it effectively allows us to take some of these groupings right here in the Dendrogram and just put it out on a tree. So for instance, I can see that the usage rates in terms of Jean, Baiju, Fischl, Kaching and Sinnoh, they all belong to like a community. All the Geo characters belong to a community. The usage rates of Barbara, Nilo, Kokomi, Ayato, Raiden belong to a group. Typically what we expect, Bennett, Xiangling, Xingshu all belong to a group here with Lenny, Child, Wanderer, Cookie, Layla for some reason. You also have like Resley, Yoimiya, Ganyu, you know, they're grouping together as well. Mona, Ayaka, Shenhe. Very obvious results. Dilu, Kutao, Klee. It's just so good, Furina. You can see all of the clusters we spoke about here are being represented in this tree-like node. And effectively, if you look here on my right-hand side, these are the communities that the program has picked up from the correlation that we can see when it comes to usage rates. So for instance, this community of characters will tend to have similar usage rates, or at least changes in usage rates, and this community of characters will also have their own like set of changes in usage rates. So I think a next step to this analysis would be to take each of these communities and almost like create a composite index of their usage rates in the Abyss, and then that could also then yield some very interesting insights. You could see here that also Dea and Sucrose are literally like kind of on their own, a little island on their own, and you can see Eula herself is also just like sticking out as a bit of a sore thumb. The interesting one here is Yelan and Gaming. It's almost like Yelan's usage rates don't really strongly correlate with any specific cluster, and I think that also could perhaps be a testament to her flexibility. And in fact, if we go to the raw data, where is Yelan? You can see that she has definitely got quite like a high usage rate and so on, but it's interesting to note that she's not really part of any community, and you also have some other characters here like Holla and Traveler. Do keep in mind, and this is going to be a technical term, that the creation of these clusters and dendrograms and correlation matrices are dependent on a couple of things. We can assess the quality of the data using a cophonetic coefficient, which I'm not calculating here, but the effective quality is hampered by the fact that we've got lots of variables but very few observations. So some of the correlations here might be a bit spurious, but for those that aren't spurious, for those that are as expected, I think we can all definitely agree on some of the results. So just to make it 100% clear, this isn't like meta characters or teams, this is just the communities of characters and how they belong together in terms of their usage rates, and that is what the program has picked up. Whether you believe it or not is obviously a function of the data, but everything here should be completely transparent. And I think as a way to give you a bit of a feel for the data, let's try and answer a very simple question. And I think this is the one that I Want to Lose Gaming posed, and that is Kokomi, or did Kokomi fall off because of Furina? And I think the answer would be a definite no. If you look at some of the correlations of Furina's usage rates with some of the other characters, for instance, she's got a negative 0.42 correlation usage rate with Nilo, and Kokomi herself has a positive correlation with Nilo, then you can definitely say that it's not directly the case. In fact, you can see if Furina herself then has a positive correlation of 0.32 with Kokomi. So what it really comes down to is the fact that there are teams that Kokomi is being played in, and some of these teams definitely have fallen out of flavor for other teams, to make way for other teams that Furina is a part of, and hence by that association you would see that the teams that Kokomi belonged into would have seen like lower usage, and hence it might seem that she is kicking out Kokomi, whereas in fact it's just an argument for the different teams. So just to repeat that, the teams that Kokomi, or the characters that Kokomi are like highly correlated with, some of them are like highly negatively correlated with Furina. So it's more a case of the fact that because Kokomi and Furina are like positively correlated, that Furina teams are taking over some of the other teams that Kokomi used to be a part of. So it's not a direct the one beats or kicks out the other. That is my interpretation. I think that's what you can get here from the correlation, and ultimately also what you can then understand here from the like node-based representation. So if some of these clusters here go up or down, or like if this Kokomi cluster goes up, then obviously that could have different implications. In any case, a follow-up analysis would obviously entail looking at the usage rates of the clusters as a whole. I think that could be interesting as well, because then you can start answering questions like, you know, did the rise in this cluster affect this cluster? But that's not the analysis that I'm going to do. Someone else can do it. In any case, the spreadsheet will be available, so you guys can obviously download it as well. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.